Hold on.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chris Harris. This is Channel 9 News on a Monday afternoon. President Carter and the leaders of 6 other major non-communist countries are unveiling what American officials are calling a concrete and concerted action program to deal with global economic problems. Carter and the other leaders are wrapping up an economic summit meeting in Bonn, West Germany. The summit's communique includes specific targets for economic growth, employment, and inflation in each of the 7 participating nations. Officials with the Carter delegation also say the summit made great progress on trade. They add that expectations are that international trade barriers will be lowered by the end of the year. The 7 nations have also agreed to an anti-terrorism pact to cut off airline service to and from countries which harbor hijackers. That agreement says the 7 nations will halt service to such countries and will work to ban incoming flights from those countries, as well as by flights by airlines of those countries flying from another country. Senate Democratic leader Robert Byrd said today that President Carter can return home from that economic summit, assured that Congress will give him the tools he needs to reduce oil imports. Byrd says the expected Senate passage tomorrow of the first part of Carter's 5-point energy plan will go a long way toward reducing U.S. reliance on oil imports. The legislation would prohibit the burning of oil or natural gas in most new power plants and would give the government the power to force many existing plants and businesses to convert to coal. Well, if you were outside at all over the weekend, you know it. We had the worst smog situation in 5 years as an unusual inversion layer dropped from the usual 2,000 or 3,000 feet to just 200 feet above the ground. The smog sent scores of persons to the hospital with breathing difficulties. Businesses were ordered to cut back on the use of vehicles and switch over to less polluting fuels like natural gas. Employees were urged to carpool, and in many instances, lots were locked and closed to any cars with fewer than 3 passengers. The Air Quality Management District issued second-stage smog alerts for the Whittier area and West San Gabriel Valley. And there were first-stage smog alerts in southeast L.A., the Pomona-Walnut area, the east and south San Gabriel Valley, and the east San Fernando Valley. High temperatures added to the misery and forced thousands to turn to air conditioners, and that, of course, produced the highest consumption of electric power on record. By the way, that was the first second-stage health advisory ever issued by the AQMD. Those air conditioners we mentioned helped alleviate some of the personal suffering, as the AQMD suggested that people just stay indoors and take it easy. But the AQMD did get tough with the strictest restrictions in our history, and Phil Cisneros reports.
Los Angeles, Riverside, Orange, and San Bernardino counties haven't seen smog like this since about 1973. A combination of temperature inversion, bright sunlight, and the normal air pollution is causing the heavy smog. As a result, the South Coast Air Quality Management District implemented its emergency episode plan. Under the plan, larger businesses are required to take measures which reduce their contribution to air pollution. Some firms are required to encourage employee carpools and cut back on the number of company vehicles in the field. Pollutant-producing industries must cut back production and/or use alternate power supplies which produce less pollution. Air Quality Management District inspectors were in full force today, making spot inspections of various larger companies. The inspectors checked to see that emergency air quality compliance plans were being followed. Meanwhile, AQMD smog monitoring stations are continuing to check air quality in the 4-county area.
Well, we have 42 air monitoring stations throughout the basin, and these stations are operating every moment of the day and night. And today they're manned because we want to be sure that the values we're getting are quite accurate. These values are brought into the office here, and where our technicians evaluate them and give us the results, so we know what's in the air 24 hours a day.
Biracco says the air quality is such that it definitely poses a danger to many individuals. He had some advice on what people should or shouldn't do.
Those people who have respiratory ailments and cardiac problems, they'll be suffering the most. And we ask those people to be especially careful, to stay indoors, find a comfort zone, avoid physical exercise. The very young, the very old, they are the first to be hurt the most. We ask them to do the same. They should avoid all physical exercise, playing tennis, jogging, even doing gardening if necessary.
The experts say the unhealthful air conditions should persist through tomorrow, gradually improving over the weekend. But officials say it's too early yet to tell whether Monday will bring a break in the smog. Until then, it might be good to stay at home this weekend. Phil Cisneros, Channel 9 News, Los Angeles.
That report, of course, filmed on Friday, and there has been something of a break in the smog, and we'll have that later in the news in the weather forecast. Those hardest hit by the smog were those suffering from the respiratory problems, such as at Children's Hospital.
The children should not regularly be limited in their activity by their chronic disease. In the children, I see asthma. However, on days like today when the air quality is so bad, most children would do well to limit their outdoor activity, certainly until the temperature comes down and the dryness in the air is alleviated.
Now, we've been talking strictly about children here. What about adults? What kind of effect will the smog have upon them?
It appears that adults with chronic lung disease, emphysema and chronic bronchitis, are even more heavily hit by bad air than children who seem to be naturally resilient. The adults do worse, their respiratory discomfort increases, and the death rates for both lung and cardiac disease is heightened at times like this.
Transportation Secretary Brock Adams is denying a New York Times report that he might resign the Carter cabinet. The Times report says the Carter administration and the transportation industry have been disappointed in Adams' performance in getting legislation through Congress, particularly in light of his 12 years in the House. Adams has also clashed with the White House on several issues since being named to the cabinet last year. He has been at odds over such matters as airline deregulation and linking transportation needs to increased gasoline taxes. Vice President Walter Mondale told the wife of Soviet dissident Anatoly Sharansky today that he was very moved by her husband's statement after he was sentenced to 13 years in a Soviet prison on treason charges. Mondale told Avital Sharansky that all Americans were impressed by Sharansky's dignity in the face of the violation of his human rights. Mondale also reiterated the Carter administration's position that the Sharansky trial was a violation of the Helsinki Accord on Human Rights. Egypt has made new peace proposals to Israel, but Foreign Minister Moshe Dayan says they will have no effect on his meeting beginning today outside London with Egyptian Foreign Minister Mohammed Kamel. Dayan says that the proposals are not relevant to the meeting, and that leads observers to feel the proposals deal with the return of the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt and not with the deadlock over the occupied West Bank of the Jordan and the future of that area's Palestinians. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat apparently would agree to Israel keeping some of the territory and apparently to keeping an Israeli military presence on the West Bank after a peace agreement. A rather deadly Sunday around the country, and particularly here close to home. We'll have those stories and more news still to come.